Hey everyone. So I want to talk today a little more about what 7th century Arabia could have looked like actually if we were to study it in a historical, sociological perspective. The whole concept of false prophets, we're going to touch a little bit about that. So one concept I want you to kind of explain in the whole natural events occurring is the concept of zeitgeist. You might have heard that term being used in today's modern day language, but originally what it really means is the cultural, intellectual, religious spirit of a particular era. I think that kind of sums it up because it gives us an idea this is not just like happening in a vacuum. Events are not happening in a vacuum. There's, of course, history, there's culture, there's a lot of things that have political ideas, philosophies that have come in together to mold a particular era and those people. And I think it's very important when we look at 7th century Arabia and this whole Arab phenomena of Islam, basically, or Muhammad's one. If we zoom out and look at it as like points popping up, you see there are a lot of people who were actually had done a very similar job or similar idea that had, calling for leadership, claiming to be some sort of prophet or a messenger sent by a god. So this is not a unique or a very unusual thing to be, brought up. These things have been brought up. They have been coming up. People have heard that before. It was not the first time when Muhammad is claiming to be the prophet that he's like the first one in many years. No, there have been. Had their own success. There are smaller tribes. They were able to pop up, set shop, sell their products, and rally people enough. So we have that aspect right now covered. So we know that this is not a very unique thing. That time, that cultural aspect, that environment was something that naturally people were springing up and claiming to be prophets. Now, you can also go on to say that most of them had the similar idea of verses, poetry, rhymes. In fact, some of them even tried to have miracles or magic. So that's like a very interesting experience as well. Like some of them were well versed in magic and magician training or tricks or whatever you want to call it, performance. So we have that aspect. Another theory that I want also to bring up is the theory of multiple discoveries. The event of things of naturally coming up to that product, like to that discovery or that next step, that next breakthrough in our learning, in our development as a society. So calculus is an example, discovery of oxygen. We have the theory of evolution. There were multiple discoveries happening at the same time. When we look at it from a zoomed out perspective, there are very close in timeline histories, multiple people, attempting to do the first or like reach that new level. With the same thing with planes. We have the same thing with a lot of discoveries. So that whole theory of multiple discovery or simultaneous invention kind of is very interesting in a sociological aspect to look at. So it's not something unique or a one-off, shot that happened in the middle of nowhere. It sort of comes up, and then just like one has really, puts it all together really well, basically, and presents you with this product. Now I want you to go into history because there were many false prophets, as I discussed in this pre-Arabia 7th century period. And let's discuss false prophets in general. Judaism, the oldest of the nation. I mean, the whole idea of false prophet is just as old as the idea of religion. So with Judaism, there are also theories of false prophet, and you can guess who was their false prophet was Jesus. They claimed him to be, the next person claiming to be a messenger or a divine connected or son of God or whatever Jesus claims to be, that's a false prophet. And in Christianity now, as the next religion, we also he has warned people of false prophet. Same thing, same story, couple, years pass, and we have now Muhammad, who kind of had rallied enough people, and he also has the same theory of false prophets showing up, So we can just argue that this is just like a natural thing. Yes, of course, you're going to want to protect your whole idea of this religion that you built or this whole idea of political power, which was in his case. He's not going to allow contenders for that. Now, when we come to specifically 7th century Arabia, many that sprung up, but a famous one that's recorded is Musaylimah. He was a member of a different tribe, well influential, and he also claimed to be a prophet. He was also successfully able to rally quite a few people, up to 40,000. His own tribe was consisted of 100,000. So there was a big influence, gathering in terms of Musaylimah. Of course, in our propaganda history, we are presented with that. Call him now Musaylimah the liar, and of course, Muhammad is the blessed one. So, I mean, this is pretty evidence or good evidence of what is propaganda, as I mentioned in my last video. That's how propaganda is built, like use of language. You can essentially call them whatever you want, give them titles, whatever you want, and narrate story in the way that makes you look good and the others look bad. But somehow Musaylimah's teachings actually did survive, even though he did. So I was curious to wonder if you ever wondered what his teachings were. This is a very interesting look because you want to know exactly what were most people at that time, what was his discovery? Is it like all the same? Are they all preaching the same thing? So more or less, very big similarities. Yes, he also has the monotheistic call for one God. I just find that very surprising that Muhammad really wants to just like attack him when he calls that. That's a big step up from your old polytheistic thing. He's calling to be a one God. But, the problem is that he's claiming to also have divine revelations. The point to note is the only person who is going to have divine revelations or direct contact or any kind of, is Muhammad, a very possessive man. Nobody else is allowed to talk to God except him. So what are some of Musaylimah's teachings? One of the things I found very interesting was that Musaylimah actually has this whole concept of equality where men and women are equal. This is in contrast to what actually Islam is. It's not men and women are equal. We have certain distinct hierarchy, and men is placed on the top, definitely. We can't argue that. They might try to brush it over with this, but Musaylimah had a very different concept of men and women being equal. That worshipping God with any prophet's name is wrong. He's too far great and beyond one messenger. So having to pray with, to your God with your messenger's name in it is quite downgrade and insulting to your Lord because the messenger or prophet's name up there. So he also didn't allow that for himself, which again, I think was an interesting aspect because that's very different from Muhammad. Muhammad is very much placed in everywhere, in every situation, whenever you're worshiping your God. The other idea is having the house of God, or the idea of Kaaba. He also criticized that because he said God is, magnificent, all creator. He does not have a house. That also ties in with his idea of praying towards, one specific direction because God is everywhere. So that was his teaching too, that he did teach prayer and it was in any direction because God is really everywhere. There's no one certain, he's not bound to a particular direction. He doesn't really have a house that's beyond him on this earth. This is akin to sort of idol worshiping, really. Most women will find a bit of a shock was that he actually prohibited polygamy. Among other things, he prohibited polygamy. I want to repeat that. I mean, that's kind of a shock because they think that's just, impossible or it was not a possibility. But he prohibited polygamy. The slaves were automatically freed upon converting to his religion. There is no such thing as Iblis because a merciful God would not, have this thing to throw people into error or confuse them or harm them in any way. Why would a merciful God do that to you? So that really ends the question of Satan or manifestation of this evil character who's always run out to get you and will be successful to some extent. So a big revolution and a break in norms, ending polygamy. So I just want to say, if you really wanted to see how it was going to be done, it could be done. Here this man did end it, and he saw the vices and all these practices. Having to claim that it was a norm or it was just part of the traditions and tribes and culture. So no, there were other prophets who were actually very much willing to prohibit and break this norm, to, bring a completely different idea of what it means to actually worship one God. And I want you to think about this whole environment. 7th century Arabs, having prophets come up. It is only natural that every religion will claim that there are false prophets and, quench or quell or dissidents or anything that goes against them because they're very much invested in spreading and claiming power for themselves. It is very much invested in that idea. Same thing here. Like the reason when historians look at Muhammad from a very objective view, they have a different idea. They do not call him a mercy of God, or like these elevations are really for your propaganda Muslims who just, are gonna say follow that whole praise and recitation, necessary forced praise. But for Muhammad, we see that he very much requires that, and it is very much incumbent that he rewrites history and calls everybody a liar, false, like silence critics rather than answering them, or having actual intellectual discussion. There's really not the element of choice here. That's what I want to point out. There's not an element of choice. And I think if you were to study history, you will very much uncover that concept. It is a very much power that is just growing, 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 and it's kind of like pulling everything in it. So I'm going to end this video with the concept that if he wanted to, he would. If he really wanted to, he would have. If he really wanted to, make this peaceful, beautiful idea religion, he would have. As we have examples basically of several other men claiming to be able to do this, breaking the norms. Like it was within their mental capacity or mental capability to think of these next level or next of like the next moral development, the next level that they should reach as a society. They were able to come and think of that. He was able to really claim equality in a society that was not. So for all these Muslims who were constantly, bursting with praise of how you elevated women, we're like, you're not the only person. There were a lot of people who could have done a lot more. So if we were to stop this unbiased thinking and look at it from an objective perspective, you'd see that things could have been very different, actually. Praising or force praising, when there were people who actually were able to think and come with even more, even in that time, in that era. If he really wanted to, he would have. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.